Today we're going to finish the third chapter of the tractate of Bikkurim, which was, by the way, originally the last chapter of the tractate. So in today's editions, there's a fourth chapter, which we will look at tomorrow. But originally, there were only 3 chapters. We know, of course, the end of every chapter is very significant. So we're going to look at this one particularly. Bikkurim is, of course, the last tractate, the last Masechet in the order of seeds, in the order of Zeraim. So this is actually a very significant point in the Mishnah. We're not only, at least according to the original layout, we're not only finishing Bikkurim, but we are finishing the tractate of seeds. And we'll see very interestingly that we finish with a reference to a sefer Torah, almost as if the rabbis are kind of moving us gently along from physical offerings to ones which are more physical offerings which are linked to the land, to offerings which are a little bit less physical and independent of the land. We'll see that, but let's just pick up in the 10th Mishnah and we'll see how these ideas play out. Now, we learned already about the baskets and the Bikkurim, the first fruits in the baskets, and everything else which was put into the baskets, and the birds and the extra fruits and the decorations, and whether the decorations have to be made of the 7 species or not. And Rabbi Shimon, this is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, by the way, not Rabbi Shimon. We had Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas yesterday, but this is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And he says, look, there are 3 parts to this. Shalosh midot ba'bikurim. Habikurim ve'tosefet habikurim ve'itur habikurim. You've got the bikurim themselves, you've got the additions to the bikurim, and you've got the ornamentation of the bikurim. So what are the additions? Well, we already learned that you can go down into your field and you can tie a string around a bunch of grapes, and you can say, these are Bikkurim. And so you've designated those as Bikkurim. You might decide to bring more. You might, when you actually set off to Jerusalem, you might bring more grapes than the grape that you identified. These are the additions, the Tosefet. And then, as we learned in the preceding Mishnah, you might decorate the basket. So these are itur. These are the ornamentations of the Bikkurim. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is going to explain. Tosefet HaBikkurim min b'mino. The additions to the Bikkurim must be the same species. You can't choose a grape and then put a fig in to add to it. If you choose a grape, you've got to bring more grapes. But the ornamentations can be different. And then he sort of fleshes out the halachic parameters. Tosefet HaBikkurim nechlim b'tara. The additions to the Bikkurim can only be eaten in purity. So they have the status, really, of Bikkurim, and they're exempt from demai. So if you buy fruit from an Am Haaretz, from someone who doesn't keep the laws of tithing, it's considered, if you like, dubiously tithed. You have to take tithe for it. But of course, Bikkurim don't require tithing because they already belong to the Kohen. So, and the additions to Bikkurim are like Bikkurim, so they don't require tithing. They're exempt from demai. And then the Mishnah concludes the ornamentations of the Bikkurim, because of course these are not Bikkurim at all, right? These are just decorations. They're subject to demai. In other words, you have to take maaser sheni, trumat maaser, and so on from it. So that's Rabbi Shimon's taxonomy of Bikkurim, additions, and decorations. And we continue. When do we say that additions to Bikkurim are like Bikkurim? And the Mishnah answers, and you won't be surprised by this, because we've already talked about the fact that we've already talked about the connection between the Bikkurim and the land. If it's not rooted in the right place, if the owner doesn't own the land, if the owner can't inherit the land, he doesn't have to bring Bikkurim. And along the same lines, when do we say additions to the Bikkurim are like Bikkurim? When they come from the land. Bisman shehi ba'amina aretz. You can put in an extra bunch of grapes, but it has to come from the land of Israel. Ve'im eina ba'amina aretz, eina kabikurim. If that extra bunch of grapes you put in is not from the land of Israel, it's not like Bikkurim. Now we're going to conclude. Lema amru habikurim k'nichsei kohen. Why, in what way did we say the bikurim are like the property of the priest? And we mentioned this at the beginning of the second chapter. And now we're going to bring a whole list of things. Shehu koneh mehem avadim v'karkaot uvhemat meot uvachov notlim b'chova ve'aisha kikruva. This priest, you're going to give the bikurim to a priest. And he can do with these whatever he likes. He doesn't need to eat them. I mean, someone needs to eat them. So he's only going to dispose of them to someone who can eat them in purity. But he can use them. He can, if there's another kohen, he can sell them to another kohen. And he can use the money to buy slaves or land or unclean beasts or whatever, or to pay off his creditors. And his wife can take possession of them for her ketubah. Just like the Mishnah says, just like a sefer Torah. If you've got a sefer Torah, apparently your creditors can take it for a loan, or your wife for her ketubah. And the Gemara in Megillah brings various situations in which you may or may not sell a sefer Torah. Rabbi Yehuda is going to say, Bikurim, not nimotam ela lechaver b'tova. You can only give them to a chaver. A chaver is someone who you can rely upon to observe the laws of purity and to eat them in purity. And the Chachamim omrim not nimotam le'anshe hamishmar. The Chachamim say, look, and by the way, the halacha goes according to the Chachamim. The Chachamim say they're giving to the men of the mishmar. Remember, we said that every region has got Kohanim who get together to serve in the temple 1 week in 24. These are the Mishmar. They're the local Kohanim. The sages say they're given to the men of the Mishmar, and they divide them among themselves like sort of temple consecrated objects. Just like anything else that belongs to the temple. And that's the end of the Mishnah of Bikkurim, the real Mishnah of Bikkurim, and we're reminding ourselves of the holiness of the objects of the temple, and we're reminding ourselves of the Sefer Torah. I brought you on the source sheet the Rambam's definition of a chaver. He says giving it to a chaver is like giving it to a sage by way of charity and loving kindness. But let's go back to the Sefer Torah. I wanted to bring you, just in closing, this remark from the Gemara in Megillah. Tanu Rabbanan. We've said that a priest can sell his Bikurim just like he can sell a Sefer Torah. That's how the Mishnah introduces. The Kohen can dispose of his Bikurim like he can dispose of a Sefer Torah. So let's check back into the Gemara in Megillah. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, Lo yimkor adam Sefer Torah afal pi she'eino tzarich lo. A person shouldn't really sell a Sefer Torah, even if he doesn't need to read from the Sefer. Yater al kain. Furthermore, Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, Afilu ein lo ma yochal. Even he's got nothing to eat. Umachar Sefer Torah. He sells a Sefer Torah. He's selling the Sefer to eat. Actually, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel brings an awful sort of construct. He says, or if he sells his daughter, this is selling his daughter as a maidservant. That's what he compares selling a sefer Torah to. It's selling your daughter as a maidservant. Eino ro'eh siman bracha le'olam. He will never, ever get siman bracha. He will never, ever get a sign of blessing ever again. So maybe the Mishnah says, look, you can dispose of your Bikkurim, and it's like disposing of a sefer Torah. But the Gemara in Megillah says, look, if you dispose of a sefer Torah, you never get siman bracha ever again in the world. And maybe that's gives us an insight into how the sages think about Bikkurim, and perhaps how they connect the world of the temple and of the seeds. We're finishing the tractate of seeds. Maybe this is how they connect the tractate of seeds to the world of Torah, which they're living in when they redact the Mishnah, and of course, which is independent of any land and independent of any physical object. It lives purely in the mind.